I'm from the Friends of Shawn, Kerri. I just wanted to take a moment to thank Dale Pleasant over there who put all this together for us. She moved mountains to make this happen, so I can imagine how it worked because of this. I really appreciate it. We have a lot of people. I don't want to take up much time, but I just wanted to give you a really quick introduction to what the Friends of Shawn, Kerri is, if you're not familiar with Shawn's work. I wasn't, a lot of us didn't know a lot of her work except for bits and pieces. So I came across this picture of Shawn here on the left in a book called The Art of Rock a few years ago. And it just hit me really hard when I saw it. And I just had this wave of emotion and memory because she was such an important artist to me as a kid. And I just thought, oh my God, I forgot about Shawn. And I just felt like, I wonder what happened to Shawn, Kerri, and I wonder, did anyone collect all the work that she did and all the amazing stuff, which I didn't even know the extent of. So I started looking, I started asking around, I started asking people and hearing these crazy sort of legendary stories about this mythical figure, Shawn, Kerri. She had pulled a full-size sword out of her pants at a germ show and chased some skinheads down the street. She tore apart the Ken Cinema with Mad Mark Rude and started a riot. She threw a brick through a cop car window and at the St. Patrick's Day Massacre show. So I just kept hearing all these crazy stories. It's like, wow, do people know how crazy and interesting this woman was? And everybody sort of knew this figure that Shawn drew called the Skankin' Man that she did for the Circle Jerks. Growing up, we just loved this. So everybody that was into this type of music, more than anything, this figure, and it lives on, it spoke to us because it was not just rebellious, it was fun. It seemed like, you look at that image, you think like, I understand that feeling. I know what it's like to be in that moment. So I started looking around and I was like, wow, she did a lot of stuff. She did so many flyers and record covers and just so much stuff. I was thinking, wow, has anyone ever collected all this stuff? And I was like, oh, she did a lot for this magazine called Cartoons. Like, wow. And I started looking she did a lot of stuff for this magazine called Cartoons. Has it ever been collected? So, I started going through and I could never find any books or anything about Shawn. I was like, wow, she drew for Hustler. She's one of the few women working at Hustler. And I started looking, I'm like, wow, she drew a lot of stuff for Hustler. And most of it won't get her canceled today. Most of it. And I was like, wow, she did just so much stuff. So it's just like, I started putting more and more stuff together. I'm like, there's this huge body of work. And it's just like I started putting together books and pages and pages, hundreds of pages. And I thought, why hasn't anybody collected this? Why hasn't anybody celebrated this incredible woman? So I just started calling people, and I was surprised to find that there was this internet mystery about Shawn, Kerri, that everyone thought Shawn, Kerri had died. And nobody knew how. She lived a rather reckless life, so there were a lot of crazy theories out there about what happened to Shawn, Kerri. And I started asking around, and the overwhelming consensus was Shawn, Kerri is dead. Shawn, Kerri died. Some people told me they went to her funeral. Some people had, remembered the day she died. They remembered talking to her mom after she died. So there was no doubt in my mind that, Shawn, Kerri is dead. I just have to prove it. My wife is a documentary maker. She said, you can't tell this story until you have the end of the story. Just find out how she died. So I started digging. I started talking to people. Everyone convinced me she was dead. I talked to a guy named Carl Snyder, who used to do a magazine called Black Market here in San Diego. He said, she's not dead. I talked to her in 2003. And he was making a documentary about a guy called Mad Mark Rude, who went out with Shawn for a while. He's sort of a local San Diego legend. And he said, at the time, she had had an accident. I didn't want to put her on camera. I didn't want to embarrass her, but she's very much alive. I just don't know where she is now. So I thought, okay, I'm going to keep looking. I guess I'll keep looking, but I'm going to prove that she's dead. I don't believe crazy Carl Snyder. So I kept looking and looking. I went door to door in PB to all the old addresses. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I don't like it. I went to the home where her mom had died, and they didn't speak English or Spanish or Arabic. So So I don't know what they spoke, but they did try to tell me that someone had come to visit Shawn's mom before she passed, a woman that had help, and they believe it was her daughter, I think. So I thought, wow, maybe she's alive. And I could find her dad's death certificate, I found her mom's death certificate, I found her little sister's death certificate, but I just could not find Shawn's. So finally, I called the funeral home where her mom had died, and I said, I just want to know, is there next of kin listed for this woman? They said, no, there's no next of kin. That's it. I proved that Shawn Kerri is dead. And as I was hanging up the phone, they said, oh wait, there is something here. Like, what do you mean there's something here? They're like, well, I've never seen this before. It's not an next of kin, but it's someone with a conservator. And I was like, well, what is that? I've never even heard of that. And I said, wait, is the name Shawn Maureen Fitzgerald? She said, yes. I was like, holy shit, she's alive? Really? So by then I was able to, like, you can just go probate court. There are conservator cases that are open, and I found the active conservator case for Shawn Maureen Fitzgerald, which is Shawn Kerri's actual name. She's alive. From there I was able to track her down. She's living in a home in El Cajon, California, very much alive. She did suffer a traumatic brain injury, so she does have, I would say, memory issues, but she is very much alive. She's very happy. She is very taken care of, and the mystery is more or less solved. But what isn't solved is like her legacy. Why is her legacy not celebrated more? And that was something, so I started talking to people to form this nonprofit called the Friends of Shawn Kerri. And one of the first people I talked to was Scott Shaw, who knew Shawn pretty well in her early days before she was Shawn Kerri.
Hi, I'm Scott Shaw. I have been a cartoonist for over half a century. I grew up in San Diego. I went to Crawford High School, and one of my friends there was John Pound. John Pound created the Garbage Pail Kids, and he's done an awful lot of other great artwork too. He kind of got tired of being known for that, so he now does digital fine art, which is interesting, but not nearly as much fun, I think. We did a lot of underground comics together. That's how I got started in the business. But John called me, I wanted to come down to see him. I moved up to Los Angeles in 1976 because I was getting a lot of work as a cartoonist in San Diego, but that was still, I still had to work at the school library and other jobs because it just wasn't enough to live on. And John called me up and he said, there's somebody I want you to meet. And he was the assistant to a teacher named Joe Nairi. And Joe was very well known around San Diego as being not only a great artist himself, a fine artist, but also a really great teacher. So John was his assistant. I went down, they wanted me to talk a little bit too. And there's this very young woman in this class. She was probably 16 or so. And after the class was over, she showed me her work. And it looked like, what if Chuck Jones and Jack Davis had a baby? There was kinetic energy in her work. There was fun in her work. There was a sense of that she really knew what she was doing. When I was 16, I was doing comics and stuff, but it was pretty amateurish compared to her stuff. And fortunately, I got better. And fortunately, we became friends, and she told me that she really wanted to live in LA because that's where there was more work experiencing. You know, she wasn't even starting to work professionally, but she knew that was where she wanted to be. So I helped her out. I first of all kind of told her about the expenses in LA. It was a little more than San Diego. I was living in Van Nuys, which is a pretty cheap area in Los Angeles, in the San Fernando Valley. So I thought, I'd already brought Dave Stevens up from San Diego. I had another fellow who I can't remember his last name, Patrick somebody, but he had done underground comics, and I got him there. It was only a 12 apartment homes in the big building, but a third of them were cartoonists suddenly. And I kind of signed off for her, so I covered but I knew that she was going to be serious. And I gave her a list of numbers and addresses and people to talk to, because by that time I moved up. I ran a comic shop, but that led to me starting to work not only in more underground stuff, but also mainstream stuff, mostly stuff for kids. And so I gave her these lists, and within about 2 months, as you just saw, one was left out. She had the most interesting span of freelance work I've ever seen, especially for a newbie in the business. First of all, she was a gearhead, so she was really good at drawing cars, which most people or cartoonists have trouble with. And she knew exactly what she was doing with that. That was Peterson Publications. Those were magazines that weren't comic shops, but you could find them in almost every supermarket. It was not aimed there was another magazine called Drag Cartoons that was more for guys that had cars and were, had their own dragsters and stuff. Cartoons was more for kids that were 14, 15 years old. They didn't have a car yet. They didn't have a license, so it was more silly fantasy of how cool it is to drive. But she put a real oomph into it, and suddenly it felt more like for gearheads like her. She also was working for Hustler, and pretty rough stuff, but at her age I was kind of impressed and mystified at the same time. It's like, you know more than I do. But the third job that she had was, and this is a capper because it defies the Hustler thing, she was also writing and doing layouts for overseas Disney comic books. And doing them all freelance at the same time, juggling them. So she was doing quite well. I need to find it in storage. She did me a nice acrylic painting of Godzilla. She knew I like monsters. And from there, she started to bloom and got a lot of people's attention. And quite honestly, when she became fascinated with punk culture, I really didn't have much more to do with her than occasionally see her, because I'm an old hippie, and frankly, the punk stuff wasn't for me. And I guess you can understand why. I have nothing against it, but it wasn't something I was particularly interested in. But I was certainly proud of what happened with her and how she became an icon.
Also move down the panel and give everybody a few minutes, because I know we're short of time and everybody want to give everybody a chance. Now, Big Toe, you sort of knew her at the other end of this, and you didn't know Shawn Kerri, you knew Shawn Fitzgerald.
Yeah, well, I knew of it. I knew Shawn. So I'm Big Toe. I'm an art degenerate from the LA, Orange County area. And I grew up kind of, I guess, assuming in the same sort of culture, Jack Davis and Chuck Jones. And also car guy, and grew up going to shows in Hollywood in the early 80s, punk rock shows. And, so was very familiar with Shawn Kerri's work for both those places. She was a big influence on my art. But so then after she died, I started, I found out subsequently from my friend John Lower, who was here, that we were crewing together with her on a tall ship in San Diego called the Dauntless.
I got a picture.
And yeah, there she is. This is a t-shirt that I did for the boat, which is kind of fun. But, real nice, sort of chill lady crewing with us on the boat. And we had some harrowing sailing stories and some harrowing party stories that I've heard from John that I can recount later. But yeah, just another side of this person who wasn't sleeping, because if she's doing all this work and then also crewing on this this old 1922 America's Cup, 23? 27 America's Cup boat. Man, how many lives did that woman live? Has she lived?
Well, and you know, interestingly, Shawn never really made much money in art, but her main source of income was she was a tuna fisherman. She was a deep sea tuna fisherman, of all things. And she worked on a boat where the guy told me that most guys quit after 1 year because it's just too hard, and she did 9 seasons. And she would go out on the boat for the whole season and get clean from all the various other activities she participated in. And then she would come home with all the pocket full of money and get back into the trouble.
So that explains why, I mean, racing sailboats can be terrifying. And, you know, but I never saw her, she was unflappable. So that explains why.
She's a tough woman. I think Greg Edson, we all know you from the Circle Jerks, other bands. And I can't think of a better pairing of an artist and a band, and trying to sort of sum up what it means. You know, the Skanking Guy is so synonymous with your band and the energy and sort of the message of it. And just, you know, I don't know how, if you remember sort of how it all came together, you know, where or how, when.
I do not remember. I don't remember the first time I saw any of her work. It might have been, did she do Eddie in the subtitles before us? Keith, he might remember. But some germ stuff. But I just remember when we got the drawing, to me it really was like a composite of all the kids in the pit, and it was like, it seemed like the perfect fit for our band. And like you said earlier about the, you know, there was fun to it because we're just a good time party band, you know.
And you can feel that, I feel. When you look at the Skanky Man, you feel that energy.
Yeah, it's just like, let's have a good time. Let's go in the pit and have a good time and listen to some good music, you know.
And you guys have been all over the world now. I'm sure you've seen that little guy probably on jackets and shirts all over.
Tattoos, yeah, some good ones, some bad ones. Sometimes the bad ones are better. You know?
And did you guys ever, you know, tell her anything for a flyer, like for the Circle Jerk, say, hey, let's do a nun in the classroom, scolding a bunch of kids? Or...
No, she had complete reign from what I remember. She just would come up with stuff. We're like, hell yeah. You know?
And did you know her well much, or see her around more?
I saw her around a lot at shows, and I was familiar. She was doing cartoons, or cartoons, and some stuff for Hustler, but I didn't know all the other publications and that whole backstory. It was just one big scene of partiness and music, so it's a little fuzzy.
Yeah. A lot of fuzzy, I think you're right. I mean, speaking of fuzzy memories, Monty.
Oh yeah.
I know you knew Shawn pretty well, and your band, the Adams, Shawn did some incredible work with that I'll bring up here on the screen. Here's some of her stuff that she did for you.
Yeah, Monty Messick's and Shawn and I were friends early 80s. I grew up in Hollywood and was in the punk scene, and I was in this band, the Adams. Broke up in the early 80s too, for reasons that you'll probably understand by the time I'm done sharing this information. But yeah, we were dear friends. I don't remember where I met her, to be honest, but I think it was probably at this club called the Cafe de Grand. And I was probably about 18, 17, 18, and we really came together. I don't know how, but we definitely came together over drawing these flyers and stickers, and just the story that I guess is, so I had this really, really good crystal meth, and I mean like blow your head off crystal meth, and Shawn drew, and I would go to her house, and she actually was right across the street from my junior high, and we would do drugs and drink beer and smoke cigarettes, and she would draw all these things, and she drew a bunch of flyers for us, and I'm like a person who likes to save shit, so I saved pretty much all of this and have one of the flyers is in the Punk Rock Museum in Vegas, the DOA one, and it's the original drawing. But yeah, and I just want to also just give a shout to Brad. We should give him a round of applause for doing this. Bringing I've always valued all this stuff. Oh yeah, here, this War on 45 DOA, if you see like in there it says, thank you, Monty, in like on the far left in the morass, and that was all about crystal meth. Yeah, so anyway, I really appreciate it, and it's good to be here, and I've always valued all the stuff that she did for the Adams and the Circle Jerks, and wondered where she was like in the 90s when I was in another band and just couldn't find her, and yeah, I'm glad that you're pulling it all together and giving her some of the exposure and the praise that she really does deserve. So.
And if you have a chance to see all of the punk rock flyers that she made, she loved all of the bands that she did art with. I mean, part of our deal with her was there was no money exchange. She never asked for money. What she asked for was our friendship, and it was so easy to be friends with her. Monty was asked where he first met her. We were talking about this coming down from LA, and I had completely forgot about where I had met her. I met her in San Diego. She was a member of a young person's upstanding, outstanding organization called FONO, which is an abbreviation for Friends of No One. Now, some of the members, we know Mad Mark Rude, who is another artist, and they were fun to be around. But I met her down here. Now, I spent a lot of time with her up there, and basically the same thing that Monty was saying. It had to do with drinking and smoking and doing drugs, and while we're doing this, she's drawing. Like she's working on something for cartoons, and it's not like it's a work studio, it's her living space, and she's doing it on the kitchen table, the dining room table. And one of our bonds was the music that we listened to. The deal that we had with her was she loved us and we loved her. Wherever we played, if she was around, she was a part of the crew. She'd show up when we're loading equipment in, she would lend a hand, and it would earn her a couple of beers upstairs or backstage or what have you. Amazing artist.
And you can see Friends of No One appear heavily in the film The Decline of Western Civilization. While these guys are playing, they're all the guys causing all the trouble in the crowd. All the San Diego crew that came up while that was being filmed. So.
And that would be the one gal that jumped up and got in Lee Ving's face,
Yeah.
and he ended up punching.
Yep.
It's Tracy, one of the Friends of No One.
One.
I think there was a time where you saw them in a liquor store too, wasn't it?
Okay, this is a good one because I'm standing in the liquor store. I've made my purchase. We were down here playing a show. I forget. Was it Adams Street or one of those places?
North Park
But
Lions, I don't know.
the convenience store is right across the street. I've made my purchase. I was quite happy. I was almost on my way out the door when this guy that looked like something Frankenstein, or Frankenstein Conquers the World, or War of the Gargantuas, or because we are at Comic-Con and it could be a horror fest too. But anyways, this guy is so big and so intimidating. It's like, I'm just gonna stand here. I'm not gonna get in this guy's way because he'll step on me. I watched this guy walk to the back to the big beer showcase, the big refrigerator. And he reaches in, he grabs a 12-pack. He turns around, doesn't even bother to close the door, comes walking towards me, makes a quick right, and goes out the front door. And I look back, like wondering, well, how could something like this happen? And I noticed that the guy who's in the store watched all of this take place and didn't bother to say anything because this guy was so intimidating. Like, I'm not calling the police on this guy because he'll meet me in the parking lot one of these nights and tear me limb from limb.
The Friends of No One, yes, with Shawn.
Friends of No One.
Active member. And that was Keith Morris, by the way, the lead singer of the circle there. Brooks next, who has a totally different take on Shawn, because you were in a band with Shawn.
Yeah, I was in a band with Shawn for a short while, the Cockpits, and I joined the band, I think in like late 78, 77, 78, and yeah, she had this car, she had I think it was a 56 Chevy, it was purple and silver, and she had scrawled on the outside of it, Cockpits. So we took a bunch of pictures down at the airport, and this is during the time after I can't remember the flight number, but it was a PSA flight that crashed.
Well, Flight 182.
And so Dorio, who was the leader of the band, she first called the band Cockpits, and then she was like Jane Plane and the Cockpits, so it wasn't so scandalous. But then we dropped that, and yeah, and it became the Cockpits. So I played with her a couple of gigs before she left the band, and I was trying to find out, how they hooked up with her. And Dorio and Jolie met her at a show, I think at North Park Lions Club, and became friends, and talking about bands and music. And so they took her on as a drummer. And Dorio tells stories about how she would go to her parents' house, and they were creative people, and they were tap dancers. And she said they had this big piece of plywood in the dining room, and they would tap dance on it. It was all really rhythmic, and so they, she figured that was where she got her rhythm from, and was able to play drums. But yeah, and it was just really a fun time when we played together. Had some great gigs, and then we lost track of her, and like years later, I grew up in LA, but I moved down here because my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, lived down here, and then I moved back to LA for a while, came back, and my husband had opened a little gallery bookstore in Encinitas, and we met Mary Fleener, and Mary found out that I was playing with Shawn, and she freaked out, and I didn't know that she had this like following, that she was this like this kind of cult figure. And she goes, yeah, she worships Shawn Kerri, and we just thought that she had maybe died. We heard that she had had an injury. We didn't know anything about what happened to her, and but it's just great to find out that she's still around and doing all right. So yeah, we're just happy that she's taken care of.
And she could actually play the drums.
Yeah, she could play the drums. Yeah, she could definitely. Yeah.
Her dad was a dance instructor, but he ended up driving a Greyhound bus.
Oh yeah.
That's his job now. Yeah. And then Thomas, I wanted to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about her impact on artists today, and what Shawn means to people in your field.
Sure. Well, I'm Thomas Fernandez. I'm an artist. I do graphics for Santa Cruz skateboards. I tattoo, play music, lots of nonsense. I got got into punk pretty young, you know, like middle school or elementary school, like a friend's older sister giving me a burned CD with, you know, Dead Kennedys and Circle Jerks, and kind of hearing a lot of that music and just kind of something otherworldly, just not really anything you're exposed to at an early age. And it, you know, you can hear the fun, you can hear the rebellion in it, but it wasn't really until I started seeing like artwork that went with these bands that really kind of like hammered home this idea of what this was, this kind of lifestyle and attitude and culture. And you know, a lot of early punk art is definitely pretty dark and brooding and aggressive, but like a key component, I think, to punk is humor and satire and fun. And you know, Shawn's work is just so perfectly that. You know, you can see it's a genuine love for Jack Davis and Mad Magazine. You know, those were kind of, from outside perspective, like obviously what inspired her to draw and make art. And you know, that was kind of the stuff that spoke to me a lot and really made that type of art and music feel more accessible. I don't know. I think the influence of Shawn is just so like incalculable. Like there are so many pieces of artwork that are so iconic that so many people have no clue were done by Shawn. I mean, like even just seeing some of these, like I forgot that she did that Bad Brains poster, which is one of like the all-time greatest like pieces of art, period. So yeah, it's really cool that there's this group and the Friends of Shawn Kerri really doing the Lord's work and really kind of bringing this back into the public eye and archiving it and, you know, bringing Shawn the respect that she should so rightfully deserves.
You know, it's funny to me that you say that. Growing up before the internet, I just assumed there were like all these guys in LA at the time drawing all these amazing flyers. Like guys, I didn't think there was like a woman doing this, right? How could she? But like to find out this all came from the same person, it's pretty incredible when you put it all together. It's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And this is just like a handful of the flyers.
Yeah, not even like scratching the surface.
It's crazy. And then Brian, I wanted to turn it over to you. I know you've got a couple of little things you can share with us.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting where we are now. Never the roadmap you expect to get to where you are. And we talked about the toys, but the same thing like getting into punk rock. I was the next generation that showed up in like '84, where it was like all those bands from like '81. I'm like, oh, those are the old guys. This is crazy. But within it, while we're at Comic Con, most of these people you talk to, they grew up on tracing and redrawing artwork that they saw in comic books. That's how they got into it. For us, it was like skateboard graphics and punk rock records. With skateboard graphics, you had this very like BCJ, it's Jim Phillips, it's John Lucero, and Pushead. But then when you get into the punk rock, it was like Jaime Nez, it was Shawn Kerri, it's Mad Mark Rude, it's Pushead, and it's Squeal. That's all you have. So the amount of time that I would sit at home as a kid trying to learn how to draw by copying this stuff in like fourth generation's photocopy that somebody wrote a letter on to me in the mail in Texas. And I'm like, oh, what's this? But it's like, Shawn was always that thing where, and to a degree, Jaime has fallen into that zone where you're like, it becomes this mystical thing of like, you don't know where these drawings came from, but there's so much association with them. Like you were mentioning the Bad Brains one, or the Germs ones, where you're like, these are the most iconic graphics, and no one's ever thought about the person that drew them or wrote them. You know, any of it, like Squeals with the type. You don't know. You get all the typefaces that you never imagined that came out of the crossbar. So I grew up on all this stuff. So here we are years later, and I go through my world as a working graphic designer. Then I do a thing on the side, making a magazine about collecting toys because I'm a nerd. And that turns into making toys, and then it ends up being my business. But then what do? Is we go back to the stuff that we love and we grew up on to make toys of. And that's where we ended up years ago with making the Skank Band from Circle Jerks. But going through Kings Road for everybody here, but at the same time, when I got to the same thing, it was like, oh, Shawn Kerri's been dead forever. And we had no idea that she was still alive.
was me.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Like, I can send you a couple people. It would have been so cool to bring her in and done all of it with her. That would have been awesome. So.
Yes, and she does appreciate it. She has a couple of them and she likes them a lot. So, and you also have like some original work of Shawn's that you got from Tesco Beef from the Meat Man, I believe.
Yeah, so a while back, and I wasn't organized enough to get it to you ahead of
Basically the same as
but-
these.
And, huh?
It's these, isn't it? That's the sequence.
They're almost identical, but they're not identical. So what it looks like, at least the working theory is that she went and did another set of drawings to send to Tesco to use in Touch and Go magazine. And that he never actually used it. The amount of original art that he had that was never used for Touch and Go was kind of monumental. It's like, oh, here's some original parts of this, and here's this, and it's like, it just never got used. But it's the same thing, like, just, it kind of came out of nowhere. Like, I've never even seen the ability for anyone to own an original piece of Shawn Kerri artwork for forever, and then this thing popped up. But they are pitch perfect, they're just not exact, like you can tell like the shading slightly different to that. But it looked like she was like, oh, I need to do another version of these, and so she just redrew them. There's no anything, it's just her brushwork, just straight. And it's pretty amazing.
It's amazing. You mentioned Jaime Hernandez from the hardcore scene. The other name I would add is Raymond Pettibone. Was also
Well, Raymond kind of goes without saying at this point. It's just like, oh, would you like a $20,000 drawing? He's doing fine. He's got books.
He's doing fine, and it's funny. When I always think of the LA scene, it's sort of Raymond Pettibone is sort of the yin and yang to Shawn, and Keith. Interestingly, you were in both of the big bands of that time with Black Flag and Circle Jerks, so you've seen. It's really interesting the pairing of Raymond Pettibone with Black Flag. You couldn't imagine a better pairing than those, and then you have you guys with Shawn, and to see, do you feel that like the music, that they're reacting to the music? I know Raymond was there from the beginning with Black Flag, and Shawn came a little bit later once you guys had started. But do you feel that they were sort of bringing to life the music in a way, or do you feel like it just happened, just worked out miraculously?
I believe in the flow of the universe, which is very hippy dippy. Certain things happen for a reason. And Greg and I hitting up Raymond for artwork to use for the Circle Jerks. Raymond, just like Shawn, loved the bands that he did artwork for. And I don't know if he loved the Foo Fighters, but that was that had to be a payday for him. Having done all of the flyers and the album artwork that he'd done for no money, just for the love of the music and the love of the camaraderie amongst all of the people. Raymond was also one of the first bass players in Black Flag. That's how ridiculous our situation was. He didn't know how to play bass. And the scenario at that time was you play whatever you can play, whatever noise you can make, and we'll learn as we go along. The thing with Raymond was the same thing with Shawn. They loved the bands. There was I've recently found myself explaining to certain malcontents, the people that say, well, the Circle Jerks, the Skank Man, you guys, you're millionaires. You've sold hundreds of thousands of these T-shirts with this design on them, and you owe Shawn Kerri millions of dollars. And that's not the way the deal went down, because when she drew the drawing for us, we didn't know what the fuck was gonna happen. You know, we didn't know that we were gonna get in a van and drive around for 4 months trying to find places to play and coming home with $150, $200 in our pockets. We, just up until recently, learned that we can pay our bills selling t-shirts. This is not Metallica. Coldplay. Sells $80 t-shirts.
Just to follow up with Greg, I think you knew the fate of the sort of backdrop that she painted for you guys. Did she actually paint that, or was it like printed out?
I'm pretty sure she painted it, yeah. We were playing a show, I think it was somewhere on Long Island, and our road crew guy at the time loaded everything. He put it on top of the trailer because he wanted to put it in last because he didn't want it to get fucked up. And then we, you know, everything's loaded, let's go. And we drove off and never saw it again. But I heard someone actually found it and has it. So
Really?
See, that's what somebody told me, but I can't remember who. Maybe that's another, some more folklore.
Here it is, a picture of it for everybody that's not familiar with it. I'd love to open it up to questions here and just sort of have a sort of open conversation with anybody that wants to ask anything. So if you want to, there's a microphone too, if you want to just walk over to the mic and feel free to jump in.
Besides the Skank Man, did she actually come with a logo with a backwards E? I've always wondered that. Who came up with the actual backwards E on jerks?
No, that was someone else, another kid from the scene.
And that was the same scenario, right? There's some.
I think his name was Doug Drug.
Yeah, and he just, he like showed up with a bunch of, here, made you a bunch of buttons, and it was that font, except for, it's circle jerks with a K for circle, and we just switched it to C and then started using it.
Very organic.
Well, so I went to Mission Bay High and sat next to Shawn for I think 2 years of art classes. And I don't know how I didn't know this person. When I knew her, well, you saw the picture of her in high school, the high school photo. I mean, that's who I knew, and I'm a very sweet person. I was there when her sister passed, and was there with the family a lot. And you know, so this is all like really, it's surprising, you know. And I didn't learn about her until last year at our high school reunion. Amazing. And a mutual friend, came up and told me that, do you know she changed her name? And we came up. So that's it's just fascinating to me. So my main question is, first of all, the Friends of Shawn Kerri. Is this a group that others can join? I mean, can I be a part of it? I don't know anything about it. Also, I do have a picture that she painted for her sister that she gave to me. I don't know.
There's a very tragic story about her sister, which sort of explains she sort of had PTSD after her sister's death,
Yes.
which really led to a lot of the drug abuse and the wild.
Because I didn't know any of that. That was not.
Yeah, but I would love to talk to you afterwards. I mean, the Friends of Shawn Kerri is a nonprofit we've set up to try to help Shawn in any way we can. Shawn
Yes.
is a conservator, as I said. She has a difficult financial situation. She doesn't have any money. She's a ward of the state, in a sense. So she can't technically earn any money because then she wouldn't be eligible for the care that she needs. So what we do is try to put that money aside whenever we raise money. I just recently raised some money to save a mural that she had done here.
Which is
But we-
the art show.
Which is at the art show, that's right. Thanks, Dad.
Oh, I get it.
So, but we try to just use it to do anything we can do to make her life better. I try to go once a month. I bring her chocolate. She likes dried fish.
The tuna fisherman stuff, that was way weird. I had no idea.
Who knew she was a drummer?
I was told by her last boyfriend where she was and what was going on, and that she was a ward of the state of California, and that there was a conservator,
Yes.
and there was you couldn't just show up and say, "Hi, Shawn, how are you doing? It's been 35 years." So I'm talking with her boyfriend, and I'm telling him about our situation where we had actually started to put aside money for her, and he said, no, that doesn't work. That is not going to work because she will never see the money. The conservator is the one who's in charge of the money, which means being somebody that works for the state of California, the money probably ends up going to the state of California. And we're already paying $8,000 a year in taxes. Why do we need to give more money to the state of California?
Well, it's a really difficult situation, and I don't know much about conservators or conservation law or whatever they call it, but I know if the person that's in charge of Shawn does not let her have visitors, I just show up, I sit with her on the porch, she's not allowed to have visitors.
I'm going to interject right here, but we do have cards to sign for Shawn because Brad is allowed to go see her, so if you can please, we did pass him through again, or once, but we'll do it through again, or come find me so we can bring him to her. And then we're gonna try at the end to say like a little thing, so maybe we can do a clip for her. So just so those are things that we can give to her.
Yeah. She doesn't need money, she's well taken care of, but she really likes, we did a fan mail drive, she really liked that. Every time I collect her work, I bring her this, like one of these. I've done like 4 volumes of these for her so far, of Shawn Kerri work. And it's just page after page after page. So there's a library out there of her work. This is half of her cartoons work. You can do one of these for punk rock, you can do one of these for Hustler, you can do one of these for, comics.
Probably not Disney.
Probably not Disney. She did about 20 stories for Disney though, so she didn't do the artwork for Disney. But there is tons and tons and tons of work. People out here that have, like John, who have like collections of stuff that she did privately for them. Tons of stuff out there.
Hi, I'm Hannah, and I went in blind to this, and I just loved every story you guys told, and I particularly liked yours, Joyce. I was just wondering if there's like any recordings of the cockpits. I thought that was a really funny name and awesome. And where you could find that.
Yeah, there's not really any recordings of the cockpits. They're all like dinettes. There's a video on YouTube that you can see. We played at the Western Front up in San Francisco, and that was at the Deaf Club in Mabuhay. So there's a whole thing of that you can look up, dinettes. I think it says at the Deaf Club. So
Very cool.
yeah, and that's as close, as it would be. Yeah.
Sounds good, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And where are you playing Saturday night, Joyce?
I'm playing at the Silo Room with David J. and Paul Jenkins from Blackheart Procession. So I think it's sold out, but yeah. Yeah,
Look
it's
for the
okay.
next one. Silent Room's a really
Yeah.
cool venue down here.
Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, I started. My name is Wayne. First of all, thank you all for coming very much to this panel. This is fantastic. I got into punk rock in 4th grade at Catholic school by my best friend Dustin. I had no idea what punk rock was, and ever since then I've been in love with it. So this has been fantastic. And my big question is, where can I find all her work? Is there a place that's cataloged, like it's online or something or anything?
Not
Can I
yet.
buy them?
I mean, it's all over the place. So we are trying to put together a book. That's our next project.
Okay, cool.
Or multiple books, especially like the porn stuff probably. It's its own little volume. But we are gathering it. I'm reaching out to a lot of people that have original work to try to scan it, to also write stories, like Monty, where you have this context to everything that was happening. It really helps to put it all together. But, just stuff comes out of the woodwork. And when I first met Shawn, she does have memory issues. But I was, asking her about her first job. She said, "Oh, I work for Edits." And I was like, "What is Edits? What does that mean?" so I went to this testing company in San Diego, and they're like, oh yeah, we remember Shawn. We have all the stuff she drew for us. So her first job, she would like ride her bike from PB all the way to this place and draw for this testing company about like what vocational job you could have. She did hundreds of drawings for them when she was like 16 years old. And her desk is still there. They're like, yeah, we love Shawn. She's great. What's she up to these days? You know, it's just like, so there's, and then she said, oh, and I worked for a t-shirt company. I said, oh, really? Which one? She said, I don't remember. So there's tons of stuff out there. We're doing our best to reach out to as many people as we can. And just, I talked to the guys that took over cartoons, and you know, they've have every issue. So we're scanning all that in. You know, that was from, she was there from 78 to 91, you know, doing at least 3 or 4 pages every other month. So covers, and I mean, it's just a ton of stuff. She worked Cracked magazine. She did a bunch of stories. She did G.I. Joke for them.
So did a lot of stuff for Commies from Mars.
Yeah, Commies from Mars was a big one for her. So
And we were both in the same cocaine comic.
that's right. Yeah, that's was that DiCaprio? Was he part of that?
George DiCaprio, Leo's dad. He was a distributor of underground comics across Southern California.
10 minutes.
Now he's
10 minutes.
got a shop.
Got it. Also, just to your question, there recently was a publication of a lot of her punk rock art by a publishing company called Kill Your Idols.
Right.
And it's Shawn Kerri. So if you Google Kill Your Idols, Shawn Kerri will come up. And he did like a series of different punk rock artists, Brian Ray Turcotte. So that's out there.
And I run the Friends of Shawn on Instagram. I try to post stuff there all the time. I just found like she did a DOA album that they rejected. She did the artwork for, I think it's Wreck the Party, that album. It's the best thing I've ever seen. And they picked some other weird photo of them like messing up a turkey dinner. And it's like, she could draw these bands. If you see the one she did of the Adolescents, you're like, that is definitely the Adolescents. Like, she could just capture the spirit of these guys so well. And the way she drew DOA is just like, how could they have not used that artwork? So finding all that stuff out there, it's just unbelievable what's out there. So, and you know, to find people that knew her in high school. There was a mural at her high school that she drew, you know, of a field hockey player on the, so there's just, and that 40-foot mural we just saved is pretty incredible too. So we're hoping to put that at the Comic-Con museum.
Isn't like a bunch of the art, is that art?
Yes, at the art show, which is at the...
Art show at the Manchester Grand Hyatt.
Yeah, so you can go in there, it's free, and there's the piece of the poke.
We got 3 of the 18 pieces. We cut the drywall right out of the wall to save that.
Yeah.
So.
By the way, Frank Zappa went to Mission Beach High School.
Wow, that's quite a... It's an amazing thing. I mean, Scott, you're sort of an expert on San Diego cartoonists. I'd say you're the foremost expert, I would say, on San Diego cartoonists.
Well, to a point, I don't know what's going on now.
But it's pretty remarkable that you and her and Dave Stevens all ended up in the same place, you know, and I mean, John Pound.
I don't know if you know who Dave Stevens is. He was the creator of The Rocketeer.
Oh.
And one of the best pinup artists ever.
And like Shawn, he really loved Betty Page, and Dave Stevens actually tracked down Betty Page and was able to get her the rights to her image close when she was basically destitute, and I think she died a millionaire because of Dave Stevens.
Yeah, Dave was a good man.
Yeah. We got time for maybe one more. Anybody else? I'll just leave it to the panel if there's anything anybody else wants to say or add about Shawn, her legacy. Again, we're doing our best to get the word out. If you knew Shawn, please stick around. I'd love to talk to you. She's still very much a mystery. I think, you know, a lot of people didn't know her very well, and a lot of people that did have pretty hazy memories of that time.
Well, and you would also look at the name, Shawn, and figure, well, that's some guy sitting in some room somewhere.
Yeah.
And that was also part of her mystique, which was really, really cool.
She also had another pen name, which is D-Lauded, which is, if you know the drug D-Lauded, that was her like for the porn stuff, so she really enjoyed that substance a lot. So that was her other secret pen name. If you see that in Hustler anywhere, that's Shawn.
I was just sent a text this morning from a friend who owns a tattoo shop down in Florida, and he just acquired 3 original Shawn Kerri paintings from a tattoo shop that closed just over here on 10th and Broadway, Lucky's.
Oh, wow.
So I think he saved a few pieces that might have just ended up in the trash or something.
Oh my gosh. That was, towards the end of her career, cartoon stopped in 1991. That was sort of her last job. She had an opportunity to work at Ren and Stimpy, which unfortunately she was not able to fulfill because of her drug use. So that was sort of the end of her career, but she did spend a lot of time in these tattoo places like Avalon. She would just sort of show up and ask if anybody needed any work, and she would just sketch out stuff for people. And she even went down to Crystal Pier. There's a couple t-shirts that she did for them down there. She would just show up and say anybody wanted a design, and she was basically door to door.
And then also on that one, we have the owner of Avalon right here.
Oh, wow.
Here, Mike Stobie. Yeah. And so Shawn did a picture of him tattooing the skink gun.
Well, she did a great piece for you.
And then Outside Art Show.
Also in the art show, yes, that's right. So please check that out. It's amazing to see her stuff in real life. And she did a shirt for John Lauer over here, which is over there, which is, what was in that drink? It's called the Shark Attack.
151 in Myers.
But yeah, check that out over there. That's her drink of choice, I guess. But I wanted to thank everybody for coming down here, for doing this for Shawn. It really means a lot. Yeah, I think we wanted to try to do like a video hello to Shawn that we can bring to her. Is that right, Dale?
Yeah,
Sure.
right over here.
If everybody.
So on 1, 2, 3.
What are you saying?
Hey, Shawn. Hey, Shawn. Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, you guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Oh, I appreciate it. It was really nice.